when Sandra Bullock felt hurt and Anna looked distant. Keanu Reeves held them together. The lights of Hollywood shined bright that evening. But behind the glitter of the cameras, something much deeper was unfolding. Sandra Bullock stood quietly in the corner of a crowded set. Her smile looked perfect for the photographers, but her heart carried a small wound. She felt overlooked, almost invisible, even though the world had admired her for decades. She had given so much of her life to the screen, to her fans, and to her craft, yet in that moment she felt like her presence no longer mattered. Ana de Armas walked across the same room, her steps confident, her dress glowing under the studio lights. Her beauty and rising fame drew everyone's attention, yet even with the applause surrounding her, she carried her own silence. Ana looked distant, her mind far away as if something was missing. She had achieved success, but she still questioned where she belonged, and whether people loved her for who she was or only for the roles she played. In the middle of these two women, Keanu Reeves observed quietly. He never liked to place himself in the center, but his eyes saw what others did not. He noticed the small crack in Sandra's expression, the faint shadow behind Anna's smile. He could feel the quiet storm forming, even when no words were spoken. The night moved on. Laughter filled the space, glasses of champagne clinked, and flashes of cameras created moments that would later fill magazines. But Sandra's heart ached each time she felt unseen. She thought back to the years when she and Keanu shared the screen in the movie that had once defined a generation. She wondered if those moments were now just memories lost in time. Anna, on the other hand, tried to stay strong. She looked radiant, but her thoughts drifted toward loneliness. Fame had lifted her name, but it had also built invisible walls around her. People admired her from a distance, but few truly stepped close enough to understand her. Then, in a quiet pause of the evening, something small but powerful happened. Sandra's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her glass, and Keanu, standing just nearby, gently steadied it without a word. It was such a simple act, but it carried weight. Sandra glanced at him, her eyes softening for the first time that night. A little later, when Anna stepped aside from the crowd, trying to hide the heaviness in her chest, Keanu followed without intruding. He didn't ask questions, he didn't push her to explain. Instead, he simply stood near, offering silence that felt safe. Anna looked up at him, and though she did not speak, her shoulders eased, as if the quiet presence of someone who cared reminded her she wasn't alone. It was strange how in that single evening, three lives moved in different emotions, hurt, distance, and quiet strength, yet they were all tied together. The cameras never caught it, but in those unspoken exchanges, a bond was growing stronger. But just when the night seemed calm, a producer's words cut sharply through the air. He praised Anna in front of everyone, comparing her to the new era of Hollywood, while at the same time mentioning Sandra as part of the old guard. The words were careless, but they pierced Sandra's heart. She felt humiliated, as if her years of sacrifice and dedication were nothing more than a shadow of the past. Anna noticed the pain in Sandra's face. She wanted to comfort her, but she froze, afraid her words might sound fake. She stayed quiet, and that silence created a distance, making Sandra feel even more alone. Keanu, however, could not let it pass. He stepped closer, his voice calm yet steady. He reminded everyone in the room of the greatness Sandra carried, of the way her work had touched millions. He spoke not as an actor defending a colleague, but as a human defending dignity. His words shifted the mood. People fell silent. The careless remark of the producer suddenly felt small, almost shameful in comparison to Keanu's respect. Sandra's eyes filled with emotion. She had not expected anyone to defend her, yet Keanu's kindness reminded her of something she had almost forgotten, that her worth was not tied to age or trends, but to the lives she had touched with her art. Anna, standing a few steps away, watched the moment closely. She felt a sting of guilt for not stepping in herself, but she also felt inspired. Keanu's humility, his ability to hold people together without ego, showed her a truth she had been missing. Success was not just about shining alone, it was about lifting others when they needed it most. As the night ended, the three of them stood in the same space once more. No grand speeches, no loud gestures, only a quiet connection. Sandra no longer felt invisible. Anna no longer felt entirely alone. And Keanu, as always, stood as the quiet bridge that reminded them both that kindness has the power to heal unseen wounds. Yet deep inside, both women carried questions that the night had not answered. Why did those small moments affect them so deeply? What would happen when the hidden tensions between them rose again? And how long could one man keep two hearts balanced in a world where pride, jealousy, and fear always waited in the shadows? The story had only begun, and what lay ahead would test all three in ways none of them could imagine. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Magazines and websites celebrated Anna's glowing presence at the event. Photographs of her dress and her smile filled every corner of social media. She scrolled through them silently, trying to appear happy, but inside she felt uneasy. The applause felt hollow because she remembered Sandra's eyes when the producer's words had wounded her. Sandra, on the other hand, avoided the news completely. She did not want to relive that moment of humiliation. Instead, she sat by her window, staring out at the quiet streets, replaying the night in her mind. Her years in Hollywood had taught her to endure criticism, but something about that remark had felt different. It was not just about her career. It was about being seen as irrelevant, as if her journey no longer mattered. That thought hurt more than any review ever had. Keanu noticed both of them retreating into their silence. He sent no grand messages, no speeches, only a short text to each of them. To Sandra, he wrote, "You are still the light many follow, even when you don't see it." To Anna, he wrote, "Kindness is also part of strength. Don't let distance steal it from you." Neither woman replied immediately, but his words lingered in their hearts. Days passed, and the three were scheduled to meet again, this time for a private rehearsal of a charity event they had all agreed to support. The event was for children who had survived hardship, a night meant to raise funds and inspire hope. The rehearsal hall was quiet when Sandra arrived. She wore simple clothes, her hair tied back, her face carrying the calm of someone trying not to show her pain. She greeted a few people politely, but her smile did not reach her eyes. Anna came a little later, her beauty as striking as ever, but her energy dimmer than usual. She glanced at Sandra, wanting to say something, but the gap between them felt heavy. She chose silence instead, standing on the opposite side of the room. Keanu arrived last. As always, he did not try to dominate the space. Instead, he greeted everyone softly, shaking hands, smiling, and listening. But when his eyes moved from Sandra to Anna, he could feel the invisible wall rising between them. The rehearsal began. Sandra was asked to share a short message that would be delivered during the event. As she spoke, her words were gentle, filled with compassion, but her tone carried sadness. She spoke of resilience, of never giving up, but her own heart felt fragile. Anna listened closely. She admired the wisdom in Sandra's words, yet she felt a distance, like Sandra's message belonged to a past generation, while hers belonged to the future. That thought created an unspoken tension. She worried that if she tried to comfort Sandra, it might be seen as pity. Keanu noticed both emotions colliding. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't deliver a grand speech. Instead, he told a simple story about a boy he once met on the street who had no shoes. The boy had smiled at him and said, "It's okay, I'll run faster barefoot." Keanu paused, letting the silence sink in before adding, "Sometimes strength is not about winning or shining. It's about carrying pain with grace and reminding others that we're never alone in it." The room went silent. Sandra lowered her eyes, holding back tears. Anna looked at him with quiet awe. The story was simple, but the meaning reached straight into their hearts. Later, during a break, Keanu approached Sandra first. He sat beside her, not as a co-star, not as a friend from the past, but simply as a human. "They didn't see the truth the other night," he said softly. "But I did. You've touched lives that no words can erase." Sandra finally let a small tear fall. It wasn't weakness, it was release. Keanu's words reminded her that her worth was not measured by how loudly the world clapped today, but by the echoes she had left in people's souls. Anna watched from across the room, her chest tightening. She realized she had been too distant, too guarded. Sandra's hurt had been real, and she had done nothing. Guilt pressed heavy on her heart, but pride still kept her feet rooted in place. By the end of the rehearsal, the three of them stood together once more. The tension had not disappeared, but something new was forming beneath the surface. A silent test of whether they could rise above pride, distance, and insecurity to truly stand for one another. But just when it seemed the moment was softening, another twist appeared. A journalist who had sneaked into the hall whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "People are already saying Anna is replacing Sandra." Hollywood always moves forward, never backward. The words sliced through the air. Sandra stiffened. Anna's face flushed. Keanu turned sharply, his calm eyes holding a sudden steel. He walked over to the journalist, not with anger but with steady firmness. "Replacement," he said, "is the wrong word. Inspiration does not erase, it continues." The journalist shrank under the weight of his voice, quickly leaving, but the damage had already been done. The wound Sandra carried reopened, and Anna felt trapped between guilt and shame. That night, as they each went home, none of them could sleep. Sandra questioned if her time was ending. Anna wondered if her rise was hurting someone she admired. And Keanu, though calm on the outside, worried about how long he could keep both from falling apart. The storm had only started, and the real test of their bond was yet to come. The night after the rehearsal, Sandra sat alone in her living room. The lights were dim, and the silence around her felt heavy. She replayed the journalist's words in her mind. Anna is replacing Sandra. It echoed like a cruel truth, even though she tried to fight it. She wondered if this was how Hollywood always worked, lifting someone new while quietly pushing aside those who had given decades of their life. Her chest tightened with the thought that maybe her journey had reached its quiet end. Across the city, Anna stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her beauty was undeniable, her success undeniable too, yet she did not feel proud. Instead, she felt like she was standing on a stage built upon someone else's pain. She admired Sandra, respected her deeply, and yet the way the world compared them made her feel guilty, almost ashamed. She whispered to herself, I never wanted to take her place. I only wanted to be myself, but her own silence in those moments weighed heavy on her heart. Keanu, as usual, carried his worries in silence. He rode his motorcycle through the city streets that night, the wind rushing past him, the noise filling the spaces his heart could not answer. He was not a man of many words, but he believed deeply in loyalty, in kindness, in standing for people when the world turned against them. He thought of Sandra's pain, of Anna's distance, and of the fragile bond between them. He knew if he did not act, the quiet tension would grow into something that could never be undone. The next day, the three were called again, this time for a private dinner arranged by the organizers of the charity event. It was meant to be a gesture of unity, a way to show that Hollywood could stand together for a greater cause. The dinner was in a small, elegant hall, with soft lighting and long tables decorated with simple flowers. Sandra arrived first. She wore a plain black dress, graceful as always, but her eyes carried a sadness she could not hide. She greeted politely, yet she sat at the far end of the table, avoiding too much attention. Anna arrived next. She wore a gentle smile, but it was a mask for the storm inside her. When her eyes met Sandra's, she wanted to walk over to say something honest, but fear held her back. She worried that Sandra might think her words were empty, so she simply nodded, keeping her distance once again. Then Keanu entered. He greeted both women warmly, his calm presence filling the room with quiet strength. But as he sat between them, he felt the invisible wall pressing harder. Sandra's silence was heavy. Anna's guilt was unspoken. As the dinner began, conversations flowed, but not between the three of them. Sandra spoke politely with the organizers. Anna spoke lightly with the assistants. Keanu, however, remained mostly quiet, listening, observing, waiting for the right moment. Then came a turning point. One of the children from the charity, a young girl with bright eyes, was invited to speak. She stood nervously in front of the table and said, Sometimes I feel invisible, like people see everyone else but not me. But then one teacher told me you are not invisible, you are light. Sometimes light just shines quietly, and I never forgot that. The room grew silent. Sandra froze. Those words cut straight into her heart. Invisible, that was exactly how she had been feeling. She looked down, her eyes blurring with tears. Anna noticed it. For the first time, she couldn't stay silent. She stood up quietly, walked around the table, and sat beside Sandra. Her voice trembled as she spoke. I never want you to feel invisible. Not in front of me, not in front of anyone. I look up to you more than you know. If the world compares us, it is not because you are fading. It is because you shine so brightly that people see your reflection in me. Sandra's eyes widened. Her walls cracked. She had not expected Anna to speak with such honesty. The pain she carried loosened slightly, though doubt still lingered. Keanu, watching the moment, felt a quiet relief, but he knew this was only the beginning. Sandra's wound was deep, and Anna's guilt was still raw. Their connection needed more than one gesture. It needed truth, humility, and resilience. The dinner ended with polite applause, but in the silence afterward, the three walked outside together. The night air was cool, the city glowing around them. For the first time, Anna broke the silence between them. Sandra, she said softly, I hope you don't see me as someone taking your place. I hope you see me as someone who wants to walk beside the path you built. Sandra looked at her, her eyes wet with unspoken emotion. She wanted to believe those words, but the pain of the world's comparison still clung to her. She did not answer directly, only whispered, It's not easy, Anna. It's never easy. Keanu stepped closer, his voice steady but gentle. Maybe it's not about easy. Maybe it's about choosing to see each other beyond the noise. He looked at both women, his eyes filled with quiet strength. You don't need to stand apart. You're stronger when you stand together. The words lingered in the night air, but neither Sandra nor Anna spoke again. They both carried their emotions home, Sandra with her doubts, Anna with her guilt, and Keanu with the heavy responsibility of holding them together. The storm was far from over, but a fragile spark of understanding had been lit. Whether it grew into healing or broke under pressure would depend on what came next. The charity event arrived sooner than expected. The grand hall was filled with journalists, cameras, and an audience waiting for a night of inspiration. Children who had faced unimaginable hardships were seated in the front rows, their eyes bright with hope. The atmosphere should have been one of unity and kindness, yet behind the stage, tension quietly grew like a storm. Sandra stood in front of the mirror in the dressing room, adjusting her simple yet elegant gown. She looked stunning to everyone else, but when she saw her reflection, doubt clouded her mind. The whispers of being replaced still haunted her. She asked herself if tonight would be another reminder that the world saw her as fading. Anna entered the same room, her dress glowing under the lights, her presence radiant. She stopped when she saw Sandra. Their eyes met for a moment, and silence filled the space. Anna wanted to speak, to remind Sandra of what she had said at the dinner, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she only managed a soft, "You look beautiful." Sandra gave a polite smile, but her heart wrestled between gratitude and suspicion. She wanted to believe Anna's kindness, but the constant comparisons from the world made it hard. She turned away, whispering, "Thank you," though her voice carried a weight Anna could not ignore. Keanu walked in soon after, wearing his simple black suit, his presence calm as always. He immediately felt the thick air in the room. He did not need to hear words. He could see it in their eyes, the distance, the fragility. Before he could speak, the event coordinator rushed in, holding a stack of cue cards. "We've made a small change," she said. "Anna will give the main closing speech, followed by Keanu. Sandra, you'll deliver the opening remarks." The words hit Sandra like a blow. The opening was important, but everyone knew the closing carried the most weight. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the card. She nodded silently, but inside she felt humiliated again. It was as if they were gently pushing her to the sidelines while putting Anna in the spotlight. Anna noticed Sandra's expression. Guilt washed over her, but she stayed quiet. She did not ask for this change, yet she felt trapped in it. She wanted to protest, but her fear of seeming ungrateful to the organizers stopped her. Keanu, however, saw the wound deepen. He stepped closer to Sandra and spoke softly, so only she could hear. "Don't measure your worth by order. Every word you speak will echo far louder than you think." Sandra tried to hold on to his reassurance, but her heart still hurt. The event began. Sandra walked onto the stage first. The lights were blinding, the audience waiting. Her voice was calm and graceful, as always, but every sentence carried the shadow of doubt. She spoke of resilience, of hope, of not giving up when life felt heavy. Her words were powerful, but her own heart questioned if she still believed them. The audience clapped warmly, but as she walked off the stage, she felt invisible again, as if their applause was polite rather than passionate. Hours later, Anna took the stage for the closing speech. The cameras flashed wildly, the audience leaned forward, and all eyes were on her. Her voice was strong, her message heartfelt. She spoke of courage, of unity, of standing for one another. The crowd erupted in applause, louder, brighter, longer than before. Sandra stood in the shadows backstage, her heart aching. She knew Anna deserved the praise, but the comparisons were unavoidable. She whispered to herself, maybe they were right. Maybe I really am being replaced. Anna, however, felt no pride in the applause. As the clapping filled the hall, she looked toward the side stage and saw Sandra's face. It wasn't jealousy she saw, it was pain. The cheers felt empty, almost cruel. Then came Keanu's turn. He walked on stage, calm as ever, and the hall grew silent. He told a story about two trees growing side by side. One was older, its roots deep, its branches wide. The other was young, rising quickly toward the sky. Some people looked at the younger tree and said, "This one will soon take over." Others looked at the older one and said, "Its time is ending." But the truth, he explained, was that the forest needed both. The older tree gave shelter, stability, and shade, while the younger tree carried new life and energy. Together, they created balance. His voice was steady, his words simple, but the meaning was undeniable. Everyone in the audience understood the message, though only Sandra and Anna felt the full weight of it. The applause for Keanu was not loud. It was deep. It was the kind of silence before clapping that meant people were touched beyond words. When the event ended, the three of them walked out together. Sandra stayed quiet, her heart torn between relief and sorrow. Anna walked beside her, struggling to find the courage to speak. Keanu stayed between them, carrying the weight of both their emotions. But then, as they reached the car, a reporter shouted a cruel question. "Sandra, do you feel jealous of Anna?" The words cut like glass. Sandra froze, her face pale. Anna looked down, ashamed. Keanu stepped forward immediately, shielding them both with his calm but firm voice. "Jealousy doesn't live here," he said. "What lives here is respect. Maybe the world should learn to see it." The reporter lowered his microphone, embarrassed, but the damage was done. The question lingered, planting seeds of doubt and tension once again. That night, Sandra lay awake, wondering if even Keanu's strength could protect her from the harshness of the world. Anna cried quietly, realizing she could not escape the shadow of comparison no matter how hard she tried. And Keanu, though steady in front of them, sat alone wondering how much longer he could keep them from breaking apart. The story was far from finished. The greatest test was yet to come the morning after the charity event. Headlines spread across every platform. The media twisted the story into drama, using words like tension and jealousy between Sandra and Anna. Photographs showed Sandra in the shadows, looking distant, while Anna was pictured on stage, glowing in the spotlight. The truth was more complicated, but the world loved simple stories. Comparisons sold faster than kindness, and within hours, comments flooded online. Some praised Anna as the new queen of Hollywood. Others defended Sandra, saying she deserved more respect. The internet turned their quiet emotions into a public storm. Sandra sat in her kitchen, her phone buzzing nonstop. She scrolled through the comments until her eyes burned. Each word that said she was past her time dug deeper into her chest. She placed the phone face down on the table, whispering to herself, "Why do I even read these things?" But her heart already carried the wound. Anna sat in her apartment, reading the same comments, but her pain came from a different place. People praised her, yet they did it by tearing Sandra down. It made her success feel dirty, like her rise was built on someone else's fall. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "This isn't what I wanted." Keanu saw the storm unfold too, but he did not rush online to respond. Instead, he drove to Sandra's house. When she opened the door, her face looked tired, her smile forced. "You don't have to hide it from me," he said softly. Sandra's eyes filled with tears she had been holding back. "Keanu, I feel like I'm disappearing, like the world wants to erase me." He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "The world doesn't decide your worth, your kindness, your work, your strength. Those things live in people forever. They can't be erased." His words brought comfort, but the pain didn't vanish. It only softened for a moment. Later that day, Keanu visited Anna. She opened the door with swollen eyes, guilt weighing her down. "Keanu," she whispered, "they're using me to hurt her. I don't want this. I respect Sandra more than anyone, but now it feels like I'm the reason she's suffering." Keanu shook his head gently. "You're not the reason, the noise is. People will always compare, but you can choose not to let those comparisons define how you see her or yourself." Anna looked at him, her voice trembling. "Then what do I do? How do I make her believe I'm not against her?" Keanu sighed. "Sometimes words aren't enough. Sometimes it takes more than speaking, it takes showing." The following week brought an unexpected twist. The three were invited to appear together on a live television interview to talk about the charity event. The producers wanted to highlight their unity, but the truth was, it felt like walking into fire. Backstage, Sandra sat in silence, her hands clasped tightly. Anna sat across from her, rehearsing quiet breaths. The tension was thick, almost unbearable. When they walked onto the stage, the bright lights and live audience magnified everything. The interviewer began politely, asking about the event, but soon the questions turned sharp. "Sandra, many say your time is ending and Anna represents the future. How do you respond to that?" Sandra froze, her chest tightened. She forced a smile, but her voice cracked as she said, "I believe everyone has their moment." It sounded graceful, but inside she felt crushed. Then the interviewer turned to Anna. "And Anna, people say you've replaced Sandra as Hollywood's new leading woman. How do you feel about that?" The room went silent. Anna looked at Sandra, then at the audience. Her heart pounded. She could have smiled and given a safe answer, but Keanu's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes it takes showing. She leaned forward, her voice trembling but honest. "I don't accept that. Sandra is not someone who can be replaced. She is one of the people who built the path that I walk on today. Without her strength and her work, I wouldn't even be here. If I shine, it is because her light has guided me. I will never let the world erase her." "Not in front of me," the audience gasped. Cameras flashed wildly. Sandra's eyes widened, tears welling as she looked at Anna. It was the first time Anna had said it so boldly, not in private, but in front of the entire world. The interviewer, caught off guard, turned to Keanu. "And what do you think, Keanu?" Keanu smiled gently, his calm voice steady. "I think the world spends too much time asking who is better, who replaces who. But kindness, respect, and resilience don't compete. They grow, and when we learn to honor each other instead of comparing, that's when we truly win." The studio erupted in applause, but behind the applause, Sandra's heart trembled. Anna's words touched her deeply, but a small part of her still struggled. Could she truly accept this? Could she truly let go of the fear of being forgotten? The stage had given them a powerful moment, but the real test would come afterward, when the applause faded and only their hearts remained. The television interview changed everything. The clip of Anna's words went viral, spreading across the world in hours. People praised her honesty, her humility, her courage to defend Sandra publicly. For the first time, the headlines were different. Instead of rivalry and replacement, they read, "Anna honors Sandra, Keanu speaks on respect, kindness over competition." But for Sandra, the applause outside did not erase the doubts inside. That night, when she returned home, she stood in front of her mirror once again. She looked at her reflection, at the lines of age, at the woman who had given so much of herself to her craft. She whispered softly, "Am I truly still needed? Or am I only holding on to memories?" Anna, on the other side of the city, replayed the interview in her mind. She was glad she had spoken the truth, but she worried if Sandra truly believed her. She wanted to do more than just say words on stage. She wanted to show Sandra that her presence, her spirit, and her work still mattered, not just to the world, but to her personally. Keanu, as always, felt both their emotions without needing them to speak. He knew the interview had been a turning point, but he also knew it was not enough. Wounds that deep could not be healed in one night. He believed they needed a moment not in front of cameras, not in front of applause, but in the quiet, where truth had no performance. A few days later, Keanu arranged something without telling either of them. He called Sandra and Anna separately, inviting them to meet him at a small community center in the city. It was not glamorous, not a place of flashing lights or red carpets. It was a modest hall where children practiced theater, where young dreamers learned to act, to write, to tell stories. Sandra arrived first. When she walked in, she looked around at the small posters taped to the walls, the children's drawings, the worn-out chairs. "What are we doing here?" she asked softly. Keanu only smiled. "You'll see." A few minutes later, Anna walked in. When her eyes met Sandra's, silence fell between them again. But this time, Keanu guided them both to the small stage at the front of the room. The children gathered, their eyes filled with excitement. They didn't care about Hollywood rivalries or gossip. To them, Sandra and Anna were both stars, both symbols of hope. Keanu stood in the middle, his voice calm. "These children don't need fame. They don't need comparisons. They need to see what kindness looks like. They need to see how people lift each other, not push each other down." Then he stepped aside, leaving Sandra and Anna standing together on the stage. At first, Sandra hesitated. She looked at the children, their faces glowing with pure admiration. No one here was asking if she was too old or if Anna was the new queen. They only wanted to hear her voice, to feel her presence. Anna stepped forward gently, turning to Sandra. "Can we do this together?" she asked softly, almost like a child asking permission. Sandra's heart trembled. For the first time, she saw not competition in Anna's eyes, but sincerity. She nodded slowly, her lips curving into the smallest of smiles. "Yes, together." They began to speak, not as rivals, not even as separate generations, but as two women sharing their stories. Sandra spoke of resilience, of the nights when she wanted to give up but didn't. Anna spoke of gratitude, of how role models like Sandra had lit her path. The children listened, their eyes wide, their hands clapping at every word. And in that moment, Sandra felt something shift. She was not disappearing. She was not forgotten. Her light was still shining, through the children who listened, through the stories she told, and even through Anna, who now stood beside her not as a rival, but as a sister. When the session ended, the children rushed to them, hugging them, asking for advice, laughing with pure joy. Sandra laughed too, a genuine laugh, one she had not felt in weeks. As the room quieted, Sandra turned to Anna. Her voice was soft but strong. "I see you now, not as someone replacing me, but as someone carrying the flame forward. Thank you for reminding me that my light is still here." Anna's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and held Sandra's hand. "And thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. I don't want to take your place, Sandra. I want to honor it." Keanu, standing a few steps away, watched the two women finally break the wall between them. His heart softened with quiet relief. He had not spoken many words that day, but he had given them the space to find each other. As they walked out of the hall together, Sandra, Anna, and Keanu stepped into the sunlight. The air felt different, lighter, freer. The gossip of the world no longer held the same power because now they carried something stronger than comparison. They carried respect. They carried resilience. They carried kindness. And in the end, it was not the applause of Hollywood, nor the headlines of the media that defined them. It was the way they stood together, holding each other up, proving that humility and humanity will always outshine jealousy and fear.